When Allied forces secured victory in Tunisia during May of 1943, they took roughly 275,000 German and Italian troops into custody. Within this massive group of captives were German medical officers destined to undergo an integration practically unheard of in the annals of warfare, finding themselves embraced as professional peers rather than simple detainees. As you delve into this narrative, drawn directly from verified historical records and official accounts, you will discover how these enemy combatants navigated a remarkably humane system of captivity. The foundation of this unique situation lay in the 1929 Geneva Convention, which outlined specific protections for healthcare providers seized during armed conflicts. Because the United States fully honored its commitments to this international treaty, captured officers could not be forced into manual labor and were entirely entitled to receive standard American military compensation. Healthcare specialists, in particular, maintained distinct professional rights and were strictly exempt from any non-medical duties. Ultimately, these detained physicians realized that American dedication to international legal standards far surpassed the ethical boundaries they had witnessed within their own armed forces. To transport these prisoners of war across the Atlantic, the military utilized returning liberty ships that would have otherwise sailed completely empty, delivering up to 30,000 captives each month to harbors in New York and Virginia for processing. You might be surprised to learn that their exceptionally fair treatment commenced immediately during this transatlantic voyage, marked by the provision of generous and nutritious meals. In stark contrast to the horrific European cattle cars utilized for detainees, these individuals journeyed in proper passenger quarters, an operational choice that profoundly and positively affected their mental state. As the year 1943 drew to a close, German prisoners of war found themselves relocated to a multitude of internment facilities scattered across the United States. Following the mandates of the Geneva Convention, Texas became a primary hub for these installations because its arid climate closely mirrored the familiar environment of North Africa. Several new locations were quickly established, ranging from the sprawling tent encampments of Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio to dedicated compounds like Camp Howes in Gainesville and Camp Hood in North Camp Hood. Regardless of the specific location, the available clinical infrastructure consistently surpassed the expectations of the captured physicians, offering fully equipped infirmaries and expansive hospital wards where they could continue practicing their craft. Perhaps the most astonishing element of this history, as you will notice, is the profound professional respect extended by American healthcare administrators toward their foreign counterparts. In a fascinating reversal of wartime hostility, detained German surgeons frequently treated injured American troops, while captured United States physicians routinely tended to wounded adversaries. Far from being ostracized, these captive specialists were embraced as esteemed peers, freely exchanging innovative surgical techniques and clinical insights with their captors. Consequently, the American Medical Corps ensured that an injured enemy soldier received the exact same high standard of therapeutic care as any wounded Allied combatant. This culture of mutual respect was incredibly genuine, with captive physicians consistently addressed by their proper academic titles and actively invited to participate in complex clinical consultations. Such dignified interaction stood in drastic opposition to the grim falsehoods regarding American barbarism that Nazi propaganda had drilled into their minds. Furthermore, the immense financial dedication to captive well-being was evident in places like the Camp Butner Convalescent Hospital, which successfully rehabilitated nearly 14,000 individuals. Beyond simple physical recovery, these advanced institutions provided comprehensive social reintegration programs, extensive vocational guidance, and diverse technical education. By the end of November 1945, an impressive workforce of 2,200 personnel, bolstered by 414 German captives, guaranteed continuous, round-the-clock care for all recovering patients. Because these vast medical centers catered simultaneously to wounded American servicemen and enemy detainees, they fostered a uniquely integrated atmosphere where rival nations operated shoulder to shoulder in the pursuit of healing. In fact, the sophistication of the diagnostic tools and pharmaceutical supplies available in these stateside wards frequently outclassed the finest resources that pre-war Germany had ever produced. Beyond the physical healing process, every German prisoner of war was granted access to an array of scholastic initiatives that would be considered exceptional even for free citizens. Nearly every detention center featured a comprehensive library constructed from donated literature, with locations like Camp Fannin boasting collections of over 2,500 volumes and an astonishing 80% daily circulation rate. For the interned healthcare professionals, this meant they could finally read cutting-edge international clinical journals that had been ruthlessly suppressed in their homeland by strict Nazi censorship and ideological bias. Surprisingly, several internment installations managed to forge robust partnerships with prestigious American universities, fundamentally bridging the gap between captives and higher education. Although many detainees took on supportive roles at institutions like Duke University and the University of North Carolina, these academic pathways granted the captive doctors unprecedented exposure to advanced American medical research. As millions of United States citizens deployed overseas, a severe domestic workforce shortage prompted low-risk prisoners to support the economy by laboring in agricultural fields and local mills. However, the detained medical personnel were encouraged to volunteer their specialized expertise in clinics and hospitals, earning appropriate monetary compensation based on their official military rank as dictated by international law. Although the financial compensation was relatively small, it served as a vital acknowledgement of their specialized expertise, leaving a deep impression on captive individuals who anticipated facing harsh retaliation. As the influx of captured German troops grew, American nurses initially grappled with internal conflicts and strict military directives that prioritized Allied casualties, questioning whether they could truly suppress their personal animosity to deliver top-tier medical attention. Ultimately, however, these caregivers transcended both their initial doubts and institutional guidelines, seamlessly transitioning to regard their former adversaries purely as vulnerable individuals requiring healing, and extending the exact same standard of care to them as they did to their fellow compatriots. This remarkable capacity of United States medical staff to elevate their healing vocation above patriotic hostility presented the captured foreign doctors with an inspiring paradigm of moral conduct that operated entirely outside the bounds of political dogma. Within these internment facilities, the captive healthcare professionals encountered a staggering surplus of clinical resources, a stark departure from the severe deprivation they had endured on the front lines. Essential items such as wound dressings, pharmaceuticals, and surgical tools were stocked in massive volumes that the Axis military networks had not possessed since peacetime, leaving the foreign physicians particularly astounded by the sheer accessibility of modern medications. For example, sulfur compounds, which were strictly conserved back home, were administered generously, while the deployment of penicillin across certain hospitals by the year 1944 showcased a revolutionary healing power completely absent from the European theater. Furthermore, injured detainees benefited from surgical operations, drug regimens, and recovery programs that mirrored or even surpassed the baseline care established for domestic troops. By rigorously upholding the Geneva Convention's mandate for impartial healing, a standard frequently abandoned by other warring nations, the United States allowed these foreign physicians to actively engage in an equitable healthcare model, profoundly shaping the ethical and procedural approaches they would eventually carry into their civilian careers. Across the state of Texas, a vast network of internment centers housed a massive population of detained troops, inevitably bringing together a significant number of specialized healthcare practitioners from the defeated ranks. Meanwhile, spanning approximately 40,000 acres, or 63 square miles, across Granville, Person, and Durham counties, Camp Butner operated as a colossal infantry base, where roughly 30,000 soldiers underwent rigorous combat preparation. Captured German and Italian combatants were transported to this sprawling installation to manage culinary tasks and fulfill a variety of operational support roles. The sheer magnitude of these military complexes, coupled with their sophisticated clinical infrastructures, granted the captive doctors an unparalleled look at the pinnacle of modern logistical and medical advancement, creating a glaring disparity with the increasingly desperate reality of their homeland as the conflict wore on. Despite the inherent boundaries imposed by the captor-captive dynamic, the interactions between domestic and foreign clinical staff organically blossomed into an authentic, reciprocal sharing of specialized expertise. United States physicians absorbed invaluable trauma management strategies from their battle-hardened counterparts, while the European doctors studied groundbreaking domestic innovations surrounding antibiotic therapies, sedation protocols, and advanced operative methodologies. Extensively detailed in historical archives, this remarkable synergy between opposing factions established a benchmark of intellectual cooperation that had never before been witnessed in contemporary global conflicts. Furthermore, the elevated status of women in the clinical hierarchy fundamentally challenged the captives' preconceived notions of healthcare administration. Because American nurses wielded significantly greater independence, actively contributing to diagnostic strategies and executing treatments traditionally restricted to doctors overseas, the foreign officers were forced to adapt to a remarkably progressive and egalitarian medical structure. In the midst of the Second World War, specifically on the 15th of September 1942, temporary accommodations were established at Fort Sam Houston for up to 1,000 captive personnel, or permanent internment infrastructure was being constructed. As the legendary epicenter of military healthcare and the birthplace of the combat medic, this prestigious installation inadvertently granted the detained clinical staff a front-row seat to cutting-edge educational methodologies. Even though their direct involvement remained marginal, simply witnessing these rigorous instructional frameworks offered the captives profound insights into alternative pedagogical philosophies. Additionally, the realm of dentistry, a subject frequently neglected in historical retrospectives, served as yet another vital conduit for cross-cultural professional engagement, allowing detained dental specialists to preserve the oral hygiene of countless inmates while receiving the exact same level of occupational respect as their medical peers. By funding routine oral maintenance, rather than merely performing emergency extractions, the hosting authorities showcased a dedication to holistic prisoner well-being that went far beyond the basic stipulations of international law. The captured officers were also integrated into sweeping communal wellness initiatives, taking an active role in infection control, hygiene oversight, and health education throughout the compounds. This immersion introduced them to a fundamentally distinct public health philosophy that prioritized proactive deterrence over reactive symptom management, a stark contrast to their own military's intense fixation on immediate trauma triage. Witnessing these prophylactic strategies successfully preserve the vitality of thousands of men within densely packed quarters served as an undeniable testament to the efficacy of domestic preventive protocols. Ultimately, it was the radically empathetic framework surrounding psychological trauma that left the most profound impact on the foreign practitioners. Conditions such as combat fatigue, which modern science now identifies as post-traumatic stress disorder, were diagnosed and managed as genuine clinical afflictions, completely stripping away the toxic stigmas of cowardice or moral fragility that had previously dominated military culture. While detained in the United States, German psychiatrists and psychologists among the prisoners of war encountered therapeutic strategies, such as psychotherapy, occupational engagement, and pharmacological treatments that profoundly challenged the prevailing doctrines of their own armed forces. This holistic, rehabilitative methodology stood in stark opposition to the strictly punitive tactics traditionally employed by the German military against psychological casualties. Upon the war's conclusion, these captive healthcare professionals prepared to return to a devastated nation, having spent upwards of 2 years practicing their craft in American internment camps under circumstances that frequently surpassed the conditions they had experienced as free citizens in their homeland. The logistics of repatriation required thorough medical evaluations and health clearances, which were executed through a collaborative effort between American and German clinicians. This concluding joint endeavor served to solidify the professional respect and camaraderie that had steadily grown throughout the period of internment. Following their return to Europe, roughly 5,000 Germans ultimately emigrated back to the United States, while thousands more made subsequent visits, often rekindling warm friendships with American farmers who remembered the prisoner of war laborers with genuine fondness. Beyond these agricultural ties, strong professional networks endured between the medical practitioners of both nations. Repatriated German medical officers carried back invaluable insights regarding American clinical protocols, administrative frameworks, and ethical paradigms, fundamentally shaping the reconstruction of their domestic healthcare system. Although precisely measuring this impact is difficult, their advocacy significantly advanced post-war standards concerning patient autonomy, professional conduct, and modern medical ethics. Furthermore, their first-hand exposure to the United States educational models, which prioritized hands-on clinical rotations, the seamless blending of foundational sciences with practical application, and structured residency programs, deeply influenced the curriculum at newly rebuilt medical institutions. A number of these former captives ascended to prominent educational roles, even if drawing a definitive historical line between their pedagogical styles and their time as prisoners of war is complicated by a lack of surviving personal and institutional archives. Through articles focusing on health education, disease prevention, and clinical updates, German healthcare staff found a vital platform to preserve their professional identity while sharing crucial knowledge with fellow inmates. Today, archival newspapers offer us a unique window into how these captive professionals viewed their extraordinary circumstances. Although heavily restricted, American authorities actually permitted certain German physicians to undertake clinical studies during their internment. By investigating non-sensitive subjects, like nutritional shortfalls among prisoners or shifting disease trends within the camp, these scientists managed to keep their analytical skills sharp. In fact, having access to functional laboratories and robust statistical resources meant they often enjoyed better research conditions in captivity than they had in the rapidly crumbling infrastructure of wartime Germany. When infectious outbreaks swept through the prisoner camps, urgent circumstances forced American and German medical teams to work side by side in highly coordinated efforts. Whether battling influenza, gastrointestinal infections, or other contagious threats, these crises served as a masterclass for the captives in modern American public health tactics and epidemic management. As German doctors actively participated in quelling these outbreaks, they acquired hands-on expertise in tracing infections, implementing strict containment strategies, and executing large-scale treatment protocols. You can easily see how this invaluable practical training directly equipped them to navigate the catastrophic public health landscape of their ruined homeland after the war. During their internment, captured officers closely studied the highly organized American logistical frameworks that guaranteed a relentless flow of essential clinical materials. They witnessed, firsthand, a rigorously structured system of inventory tracking, strategic emergency reserves, and flawless distribution networks, which stood as a master model for operational efficiency. Experiencing this sophisticated approach to supply chain management profoundly reshaped the German doctors' understanding of how to sustain reliable clinical operations, even in the face of severe adversity. Ultimately, you realize that mastering these logistical principles became a cornerstone for those tasked with resurrecting Germany's shattered healthcare network in the years that followed. Working within the confines of camp infirmaries, the interned doctors encountered groundbreaking American methodologies for treating severe battlefield injuries. The widespread application of antibiotics to ward off infections, coupled with sophisticated surgical debridement and meticulous patient charting, showcased a level of care that far surpassed standard German military protocols. By actively observing and engaging with these innovative wound management strategies, the captive physicians absorbed life-saving techniques that would eventually transform the landscape of post-war German trauma care, significantly boosting recovery rates for civilian casualties. The heavy American focus on proactive healthcare introduced the prisoners to a fundamentally different clinical philosophy, characterized by regular physical exams, widespread immunization drives, and robust health literacy campaigns. While the concept of prevention was certainly not foreign to German physicians, their military framework had heavily marginalized it in favor of acute trauma surgery, making this comprehensive approach highly influential for their future practices. Furthermore, the captors' revolutionary approach to rehabilitation, prioritizing a patient's return to peak functionality rather than merely discharging them as pensioners, deeply impressed the German staff. They watched extensive physical, occupational, and vocational therapies in action, absorbing holistic recovery methods that vastly outshined their own military capabilities, and ultimately shaped the future of German restorative medicine. Communication standards also presented a stark contrast, as American protocols for interacting with patients, collaborating among specialists, and drafting medical charts differed wildly from traditional German norms. The relentless focus on transparent record-keeping, comprehensive patient education, and seamless interdisciplinary dialogue served as an ideal template for clinical efficiency. Adopting these refined communication strategies helped post-war German practitioners cultivate a much more collaborative, patient-centric environment as they rebuilt their nation's healthcare sector. Ultimately, you can see how the unique circumstances surrounding these captive medical teams proved that a shared professional ethos has the power to completely eclipse fierce national rivalries. By treating the interned physicians as esteemed peers, eagerly exchanging surgical techniques and clinical knowledge, the American Medical Corps forged enduring professional bonds that survived long after the conflict ended. Although the complete scope of this intellectual exchange may never be fully quantified, historical records confirm that these prisoners received a level of professional validation that often eclipsed what they had experienced within their own armed forces. Naturally, this harmonious dynamic was not without its flaws. Rigid security protocols, linguistic hurdles, and the undeniable reality of captivity inherently restricted total integration. A number of American doctors deliberately maintained a cold distance, just as several German officers stubbornly rejected foreign methodologies. Yet this complex interaction remains an absolutely fascinating anomaly in the annals of military history. Choosing to engage with enemy surgeons as fellow practitioners highlighted an unwavering American commitment to both international humanitarian law and core ethical principles. The ripple effects of this decision stretched far beyond the individual prisoners, ultimately leaving an indelible mark on the reconstruction of Germany's medical infrastructure. While tracing exact lines of influence can be challenging, the captive doctors undeniably infused their rebuilding nation with the advanced techniques, ethical frameworks, and organizational models they had absorbed overseas. Ultimately, this historical narrative powerfully illustrates how the healing arts can sustain deep, professional connections through the darkest periods of human warfare, proving that mutual respect and shared scientific values can triumph over violent conflict. The enduring significance of this historical precedent continues to resonate deeply within modern military healthcare and global medical diplomacy. When United States forces provided equitable treatment to captured German healthcare staff, they vividly illustrated the profound belief that a healer's responsibilities easily eclipse any geographical borders, a standard that still serves as the bedrock for ethical conduct in armed conflict and international partnerships. Instead of the bitter hostility they anticipated, these captive officers encountered a remarkable spirit of professional camaraderie, ensuring they returned to their homeland equipped with far more than just clinical expertise. Ultimately, they discovered firsthand that mutual respect among specialists can withstand the deepest ravages of conflict, that moral obligations rise high above political dogma, and that former adversaries can seamlessly unite under the shared, noble pursuit of saving lives.